We moved into that house on Christmas in '97. It started off great. The house was renovated to how it was originally built in 1816. The only real problem with the house was just some family of rats that lived in the walls. But with that price the bank gave us, we couldn't pass it up. It had plenty of property for me to go hunting. It had plenty of space for us. I mean, me, my wife, my daughter Sarah, and our newborn Charlie. This was supposed to be the house we would spend the rest of our lives in. And for them, that was true. For the first few months, the house was everything we wanted it to be. Liza was a stay-at-home mom with the kids, while I went to go work at the paper mill. When Sarah wasn't in school, Liza would play games with her around the house like hide and seek, find the bear, and tea parties. When I came home from work at around 6, she would have dinner on the table and we would eat as a family. Everything was perfect. Then, in the summer of '98, we started to notice some strange things. At first, it was just some things were moved from where we put them, like the keys to the truck would be on a different table, or some things would be gone 1 second and then right where we left it the next. It was an old house, so noises were expected, but we constantly heard someone pacing downstairs when everybody was upstairs or tapping in the walls. Nothing happened in the beginning that would make us question our sanity. That is, until Liza called the cops the first time. It was a Friday and I had gone to work. Liza was at home with Charlie and Sarah playing the game they made up called Find the Bear, which is a game where Liza would hide a teddy bear somewhere in the house and Sarah had to find it. Liza told me that she hid the bear in Charlie's room, and while Sarah was looking for the bear, Liza heard a tapping down in the basement. She left Charlie playing with some toys in the living room and went down into the basement to figure out what that tapping was. She told me when she got there, she smelled something terrible. Tapping was now louder, and she couldn't find where it was coming from. We didn't keep anything down there, so it was just brick and concrete. Only thing in there was a light bulb that hung from the ceiling with a pull string. She told me the light flickered a bit and then cut off while she was down there. Liza was scared. She searched for the light, and when she pulled the string, the light came on, and there in front of her was a woman. Pale. A hole in her chest, and screaming with a look of horror on her face. My wife, she ran up the stairs and slammed the door. She called the police to come check out the basement. When the police arrived, they didn't find anyone down there. They searched the whole house, didn't find anyone. After the commotion, when Liza finally collected herself and turned her attention back to Sarah, well, she asked Sarah if she found that teddy bear. Sarah told Liza that she did. She said an old lady handed it to her in Charlie's room. I never believed in ghosts. Liza did. She came from a very superstitious household, and she believed all that horse shit, but I didn't. I failed her. I failed to comfort her when she needed me. Whenever I was gone, she would see things or hear stuff around the house. Sarah would see things too. A few nights, Sarah would wake up screaming. She had really bad nightmares all her life and cried all the time as a baby, so I didn't think anything of it. She would say there was someone under her bed. Well, to comfort her, I would check under the bed before I cut on the light and said goodnight to her. She told me that late at night, when it was dark, A hand would come up from under the bed, and a scary little girl with red eyes and a white mouth would stare at her. I never believed her, but I wish I did. Charlie, he would cry at night too. He only started to cry in his bed when we moved to that house. When he was an infant, that boy never shed a tear. He was the quietest baby in the world. Around 3 in the morning most nights, that little boy would cry his eyes out. He didn't know many words at the time, but what he did know was the word scary. He said the word scary a lot. I just thought Sarah was influencing him with that. Liza scared the hell out of me one night. I was asleep in the bed, and so was she until she woke up for a second. She said she saw an old woman standing in the corner. She told me the woman walked over and climbed into the bed, keeping eye contact the whole time. She crawled into the bed and got on top of her and placed a cold hand on her face. Liza couldn't move the whole time. She couldn't scream. All she could do was cry. The woman bent down towards her face and whispered something into her ear. Then the woman just faded away. And Liza regained all functions of her body and woke up screaming and crying so loudly it woke the children. It was that night I became scared for her. I didn't believe any of this was real, really, until the summer of '99. You told me about the house changed into that Victorian interior and the lights on and everything, right? Well, something similar happened to me. Liza was on the verge of a total mental breakdown from the house, so she went to stay the weekend with her sister in Richmond. I had off at the paper mill that weekend, so I went into town to get some groceries and came back home. When I opened the door, the house was different. What I saw was an old house. The interior was decayed. Terrible smell drifted around the house. Chandelier was broken on the ground. I was thinking, what the hell is going on? I dropped my bags and walked upstairs. The steps almost collapsed under my weight. I went into our bedroom and it was red. Red as in not the paint, but there was a red hue, like a fog in the room. It scared the hell out of me. I felt dread inside me tearing me up, and then I heard a noise from downstairs. I remember I went downstairs and my foot broke one of the steps, messing up my leg. A broken board ripped into me, making a mess of things. I remember limping over to the living room. All our furniture was gone, just a table in the middle of the room with nothing on it. The basement door slammed closed. I walked over to it and heard screaming coming from the basement. I opened the door and then everything stopped. The house went back to normal. I looked around, our furniture was back, and the house looked exactly like it was when I left to go grocery shopping. And my leg, it was cleaned up too. I should have stopped there. I should have just left right then and there. Should have sold the damn house and moved on. And instead, I walked down into the basement. I had to know who was down there. I walked down those stairs and the air got heavier. The hairs on my arms stood up, and suddenly I didn't feel alone in the house. I got to the bottom of the stairs and cut on the light. Looked around. In the corner was Liza and the kids. It looked like them, but it really wasn't them. Charlie and Sarah were facing the corner, and Liza was looking at me, screaming, "Help me." But no words were coming out. She had a big hole in her chest, and her eyes were bleeding. I screamed and backed up, and I turned around to see her. It was the old woman that Liza was telling me about. She stared at me blankly, with dark eyes, a black dress, white pale face. What scared me the most was that she was floating off the ground. She slowly glided over to me, and then the light went out. Everything was dark. She grabbed my face, and then I woke up the next day. I went upstairs and found my spoiled food on the ground by the door. Everything was normal, it seemed. I called Liza's sister, and she told me they were on their way back. I knew then it was time to move. After that day, Liza and I decided to move in with her sister until we sold the house and moved into a new place. We just knew that we couldn't live there anymore. We started to pack and was going to sleep there one more night and leave the next day forever. Everything, it felt better. It just felt like a weight was lifted off our shoulders and everything was going to be all right. I said goodnight to my children, told them I loved them. Liza and I went to bed, and I kissed her goodnight for the last time. I know that I had a terrible nightmare about the house and about that old woman. I woke up in the middle of the night and Liza was gone. I didn't think anything of it, just maybe she was in the bathroom, so I went back to sleep. I woke up in the morning to birds chirping outside and then the sun shining into the bedroom. It just felt like everything was over and everything was going to be good. We were going to move to her sister's and we were going to be a family again. I walked past the bedrooms and the doors were open. Neither of the kids were in bed. I walked downstairs and didn't smell any breakfast cooking like I was expecting. I didn't hear anyone in the house. I looked outside and saw the truck was still there. I walked into the kitchen and on the counter was rat poison and the kids' cereal bowls. I looked over and saw that the basement door was wide open. How I felt right then I can't describe. It was a mix of confusion, rage, sadness, panic, dread. I ran down the basement stairs and found them. My 2 children lay dead on the ground, with foam coming out of their mouths. My wife stood over them blank-faced. I cried my eyes out and yelled at her. Then I felt a cold hand touch my head, and then I was out. I remember waking up to a police officer punching me in the face. I looked around, and in my hand was the 12 gauge I used for hunting, and my wife was dead on the ground. I had shot her through the chest. They dragged me to my feet, yelling and screaming at me. I cried some more, not knowing what was going on. Apparently, when her sister hadn't heard from us, she called the cops to come check out the house. When they arrived, they found the children and my wife dead with me passed out, holding the shotgun. Randall sat there crying into his hands. The chains dangled from his wrists. He wiped his face and looked up at me and said, "Promise me one thing, Officer Jones, that you will burn that house and the old woman in it, because I believe what you told me, and she is collecting more souls for that house. She cannot hurt anyone anymore." I got up from the table and walked to the door with my head spinning with what to do about that house. I turned back to Randall Cummings and nodded my head at him, hoping he knew that I would carry out his wishes. No one else in this town will be hurt by that old woman again. I will burn that house down.